Probably the biggest misconception about how to be successful is that you should give people what they want. That is not your goal. Your goal is to invent what people want. The entity most capable of giving people what they want is always going to be a corporate entity. It is always going to be some kind of structure that has, in recognition of what people want, found the cheapest, easiest way to provide that thing in as massive a quantity as possible. That is not something for you as an individual to attempt to tackle. What your goal should be is to create something that people didn't know they wanted, that they can only get from you. If it's something that they can get from somewhere else, it will be done better. There will come along a corporation, an entity, something that will recognize that what you have done is easily reproducible, and they will reproduce it faster and better than you can do it, in a way that has market research behind it, in a way that is perfectly crafted to reach as many people as possible. If what you're doing can't be reproduced because it is integral to you, then you will always be successful as long as you can convince people that they want what you offer. I have a tendency to assume that if I've heard of something multiple times that it must mean that it's common knowledge, and then I'll talk to somebody who's never heard of it. So I'm just going to go ahead and tell this little anecdote that I think a lot of you probably have heard. But it's about pasta sauce. It is a commonly cited study that happened in the 50s. Well, maybe not a study, but just sort of a cultural event that shaped the way that modern economics works, that shapes the way that marketing is handled. It was an occasion in which pasta sauce companies, wanted to have better sales, so they started just asking people, what do you want as flavors? They were like, what do you think would be a good thing? What do you guys want? What does the customer want? And so based on the results of polls, they started creating pasta sauces that people were asking for, but they didn't turn out very good and people didn't buy them. People just, they thought they wanted it because it sounded good on paper, but it didn't turn out the way they were expecting. What the companies eventually started doing was just testing shit for themselves, figuring out what seemed to work in the labs, testing it, you test products, test audiences, and then putting it on store shelves. People will try it out of curiosity, and then once they find out that it's good, then they will continue buying it. This is the entirety of how things work now, particularly in the food industry. Anytime you see a new flavor of something emerge, it is because it was tested out. They, came to the conclusion that it worked, and then they put it on shelves, and if people buy it, they continue doing that flavor. If not, then they stop. Or maybe they'll, have it as a seasonal thing, if it's something that people tend to get excited about at certain times, but not so much at other times, So, I think this has application basically everywhere. There's no reason that people would know what they want, because people are not experts in the field. Just because you are an expert in the field of tasting things and knowing that things taste good doesn't mean that you have any idea why they taste good, what has gone into making them. On average, most people have no idea the composition of the things they consume. And so, on the one hand, you have to listen to people to figure out, generally, are they enjoying something or not? But what you should not listen to is what they think they want from you. You can use it as a sort of guideline. You can say, okay, well, this person is saying they want this, but is there more to it than that? What does it suggest for someone to say that they want this? Can I read deeper into what they're saying? Because sometimes, they might not understand what they really have a problem with or what they're really seeking, but the fact that they even think there is something means that you can go in and have a look under the hood of what you've done and figure out if there is, something in there that might be causing that kind of perception. But shifting what you do on the basis of what people are saying you should do is not the answer. Of course, this means I'm going to go ahead and talk about myself, because I always do. I think that's more or less what you come here for. So let's talk about my own career. When I got started on YouTube, no one would have advised me to do anything the way that I do it. And a lot of the things that I did ended up becoming normalized and becoming not strange to people, because either my influence was affecting other people to do things similarly to me, or there were just other people coming to the same conclusions about what type of content would work on YouTube. When I first got started, the way that reviews worked was that they were more geared towards entertainment and presenting a very structured review. Like, people would come at things from like the angle of talking about each facet of a show individually, giving it a score at the end. There was always like a clearly defined formula for how each video played out. There was a certain style of thumbnail, a certain style of editing, a certain kind of character. Particularly when I first got started, the internet was still very much affected by the influence of Angry Video Game Nerd and Nostalgia Critic and everybody who had copied them. So most reviews had some element of parody film to them. There was usually some kind of skits, some kind of character being portrayed, some combination of comedy and analysis. And the stuff that got a little bit more analytical was a lot rarer. You had stuff like the Mr. Plinkett reviews or Sequelitis by Ego Raptor, but there wasn't a whole ton of like popular channels of people just dryly analyzing media. What there was not that popular. Errant Signal was the first channel that I had found who's a video game analyst. He probably had like 30,000 subscribers at the time, in 2012, which is not a ton, but not nothing. And he, was doing things similarly enough to the approach that I was taking to anime blogging that I thought, okay, there is somewhat of a proven audience for this on YouTube. Can we just go with that, and like, will people gravitate towards this style? I had thought for a long time that the way I like writing just didn't have an audience, that there was not going to be people who liked that because I hadn't seen it before. But when I saw people doing something that was kind of tangentially similar, I decided to go ahead and do it. And what I found was that there were way more people who had just been kind of waiting for something like this to come along, or didn't even know that they wanted it, but as soon as they saw it, they knew that it was something they wanted, and it had just never been put in front of them before. And because I'm talking about shows that people care about, and I have a catchy title and thumbnail, somebody clicks on the video, they don't know what to expect, and then they get something different, but that they like. So you would think that I would listen to my own advice, and that I would only ever do what sits right with me. But I will admit that sometimes I find myself confused by the culture surrounding me of YouTube. Sometimes I feel like the things that I would be most interested in, I don't always understand why they don't catch on. A lot of people look at my career and they see it as this downturn in view counts. That like, I used to have videos that got tons of views, now I have videos that don't get that many views. The reality is that there were always like 1 in 4 videos got a lot of views, and most of them got like nothing. Like, my view counts would often be much worse than they are now on a lot of my videos. There were just certain ones that would blow up, and even then, the ones that did, those view counts did not come quickly. My videos have a lot of shelf life. They have a lot of longevity. They survive because people continually search for the shows that I'm talking about. Some of them catch second wins where, when a show gets brought up again because there's another season. Like, for instance, my Mob Psycho 100 video. I think when it came out, it probably had about 200,000 views. 6 months later, it was up to 500,000. When season 2 came out, it got up to 1 million. So, these things continue to build, and it causes my past to look more glamorous than my present. But, you could keep looking at the videos and always watch them continue to grow as time goes on. So what I'm trying to explain here is not so much that, things are as good as they've always been or anything, but rather that I've always been in a position where a lot of what I put out doesn't really succeed and I don't really understand why. Or I find myself thinking, to me, this was just as interesting or better than the other thing I did. And a lot of the times it's obviously a marketing issue. You're going to have more views if you talk about the stuff that's good, if you give it the right kind of title, the right kind of thumbnail. That's usually the main thing that matters. Sometimes there is a more ephemeral quality, or it's just like this one happened to catch on with the right people or get shared in the right community and the other one didn't. But when you have a lot of those experiences, you tend to start to doubt your own judgment. You're thinking, okay, well, maybe I'm not the one who knows how to market this stuff well, or maybe, I am not the one who can pick out the subject matters the best. And so I do tend to turn to my audience and ask them like what they think is a good idea sometimes, and I'll try it out. I'll just give everything a random shot. And what I find usually is that things go even worse. When I do what people think I should do, it doesn't usually go well. And a lot of that is because of the fact that I think that those people have an image in their mind of what it's going to be like if I do the thing they're telling me to do, and it doesn't come out that way because it's not really in my nature. For instance, putting text on thumbnails. People have always been telling me, like, you gotta put text on your thumbnails, like, because I used to have a lot of success just by putting close-up pictures of cute anime girls' faces in my thumbnails, and that was always the way that my biggest videos worked. Anything I have with a ton of views usually has a close-up of a cute girl's face in it. And so when that wasn't always paying off, then people started to say, oh, well, times are changing. You gotta have text, you gotta have some indication of what your channel is. And then I might do something like that, and then I just get complaints about it. For instance, with the I Am Games channel, we had heard, Tom and I, that you need to have a logo on your thumbnail so people know it's you. But when we started putting the logo on the thumbnails, people kept saying, oh, it looks like shit, it makes you look like a generic channel, the logo makes me think this is going to be like an IGN video or something. Or I put text on screen and people criticize my font choices, or they say that the text isn't, eye-grabbing enough. And the bottom line is that it's not about whether or not there's text on screen. It's about whether or not the thumbnail is aesthetically pleasing. It's about whether or not it is eye-grabbing. And so what I need to think about is not any of the advice anyone's giving me, but just what is eye-grabbing? Does this make me want to click this video? And what would make me want to click a video is definitely different from what makes other people want to click a video. And sometimes I have to remove myself because I personally don't look at thumbnails, really. I just watch my subscriptions. I watch everything I'm subscribed to. So, like, I don't really care what the thumbnail looks like, but when I think about it from the perspective of like, okay, I am random viewer A, I'm looking for shit to watch in my sidebar, what am I going to click on? That consideration is enough to know what to pick. But, it's just about putting yourself in that mindset. It's not about there being any special technique, because the ways I've achieved those results have been extremely varied. It's been all kinds of different ideas of what would catch people's eye. You don't really need to understand any kind of set technique. You don't need to understand like what's been successful for other people. You need to understand just psychology. What would make someone click on it? It could be any number of things, but it has to be what would make someone click on it. And that mentality of divorcing yourself and thinking of it in those kind of logical terms is very core to all of marketing. You can not ever be thinking about like just what makes, what feels right to you. You have to think about like what makes sense logically. For instance, a big problem I think that I and most people have when it comes to marketing is repeating yourself. It's very difficult to continuously think to repeat yourself if you feel as though, you're wrapped up in your own narrative. You feel like, okay, well, I already said this in one video, and surely if you are following my content, you heard it in that video. Well, that's a pretty big assumption. I mean, most people kind of skip around. Most people are not watching every single thing you do. I mean, you could even just look at the view counts on the videos and say, okay, well, if 10,000 people are subbed to me, and this video has 11K views, and that one has 2K views, and I made the point in the 2K view video, then clearly the 8,000 people who would have clicked on one of my other videos haven't seen that one, so I have to keep repeating it and make sure that anybody would have heard it. It's like that constant need to pull yourself out of the question. Don't think of it in terms of how you feel. Don't think of it in terms of what makes sense to you. Don't think of it in terms of, oh, this is how I consume content. You have to think of it in terms of like, if I am random guy who doesn't know who I am and is just clicking randomly on videos, what will get that person's attention? What will draw them to the place I want them to be? If there's some kind of artistic venture that I've done on the side that I hope that some people will get funneled to, I have to mention it in the big successful video. And the only way you know that you're going to do that is by mentioning it in every video. And yes, it might annoy you and it might annoy certain viewers, but you can't listen to those people. You have to pay attention to the numbers. You have to just be watching the raw numbers game. Is what I'm doing making me successful? Is it fulfilling what I'm trying to get out of it? And if the answer is no, it doesn't matter what people are telling you is the right thing to do or what you think is the right thing to do. If it's not successful, it's not the right thing to do. Unless the goal was not to be successful, which it's not always. And success comes in a lot of different forms. It's not about view counts necessarily. It might be about patron numbers. It might be, what can I do that will boost that the most? For me, I'm in a position where I'm making the most money I ever have by deliberately not thinking about view count so much and just thinking about how do I market to patrons? How do I market the Patreon? How do I market my ability to sell products that I enjoy creating? Things that I think are fun and fun ways to interact with fans. How can I even, get view counts? If I do want the view counts, think of them differently. Don't think of it as oh, I have to make a big video that gets 300,000 views. If it would be more fun for me and more reliable to, create 10 videos that across all of them get 300,000 views and took the same amount of effort as the video that, was aiming to get that but might not. It is the risky venture as opposed to the safe, formula content. So, you have to think about all that kind of shit when it comes to how you're going to market and how you're going to try to be successful. But again, it's never about giving the people what they already know they want. They can get that anywhere. It's about inventing something for people to want that they can't get from somewhere else and they need you for.